So thank you, everyone. My job is to help moderate some Q&A. We have 2 microphones that have been placed for Madam Vice President to address some of your issues, concerns. Please, questions. Please state your name, your affiliation at Columbia, and your area of study, and please pose a question. Thank you. Start over here.
Hello, my name is Camilo Rivera. I'm a junior student at Columbia University studying political science. And my question was more pointing out the elephant in the room here, and that's the question of the credibility of the commission Panama set up. As you know, Joseph Stiglitz and another member of the committee resigned on terms that they didn't believe that the committee was going to be credible, that they didn't have enough independent power, and that wasn't transparent enough to make the recommendations Panama needed. So my question is, how committed is the Varela administration to combating tax havens, and how committed is it to hear the tough recommendations that the country needs to do to fix the problem it has? Thank you.
Madam Vice President.
Thank you for pointing out the elephant in the room. I'll answer in your 2 separate questions, and I'm very glad Professor Stiglitz is here, present. Our expectations of the committee were very high. That's why we invited Professor Stiglitz. We would have not invited such a renowned scholar that we respect to be a member of the independent commission that we named if it were not because we were and are very serious about listening to what they have to say, and also very interested in having concrete recommendations. And we know enough of Professor Stiglitz's work to know that the recommendations were going to be important and probably tough. That's why we invited him. And I have to say, I personally had very high expectations of the work. Actually, we discussed this when we invited him, and I personally did. We were kind of shocked at the message, and I respect it. I wish to understand better what happened. I still have that pending. The information that I have is 2 things. We set up an independent committee formed by 7 people, 3 international, 5 or 3 international, 4 Panamanian. I must say, in the case of the Panamanians, very recognized Panamanians, as well as the international members were recognized people. The Panamanian members, one of them was the Panama Canal administrator for 10 years. Another one of them was a member of the World Bank for many years, and later on president of the Republic of Panama. So a strong team. What I got, the information I got from the link, because we had a liaison between the government and the committee, was 2 things. First of all, that there was this agreement with the objective of the report. The government had requested a report on recommendations to Panama, and some of the members were more geared towards a recommendation to the global system. And there was difference between them. This was not the decision of the Panamanian government. There were differences within them. The second thing I heard is that the Panamanian government had refused to make the report public. And Professor Stiglitz, that's here, will be able to corroborate if you ask him later about this. We never said that we didn't want the report to be public. We said we needed to see it first. It's just understandable that the government of Panama cannot learn about a public report on the papers. What is weeks, a month to review it? I think that's responsible. As a government, I think that is only responsible. We didn't want to see it to hold it. We didn't want to see it to hide it. I mean, come on, would I pretend to hide Professor Stiglitz's work? That's impossible. So I understand those are the 2 reasons for the exit of 2 international members of the committee. I respect their decision. I regret it, but it's their decision. The rest of our members have continued to work, and we will be looking forward to their recommendations. And unfortunately, is not a member of 7 with 2 important scholars as a part of it. But that was beyond our control. The second question, is Panama's government truly committed? 100%, 150%. And I mentioned in my message, and I'll reiterate it because it's geared particularly to the question, not as a result of the publications. Our government, and I was sharing with President Bollinger before this message, I must recognize that Panama came to this process late. And there are costs to us because we came late as a country. During the previous government, as my current president, Varela, was vice president and minister of foreign affairs, he defined a roadmap and moved fast. And we negotiated within a year and a half of his participation in that government 30 double taxation agreements, which was the norm at the time. And they were implemented. And then the alliance broke. And then he left the government and nothing happened. So for 3 years, nothing happened. I must recognize that. So we assumed government and we have a backlog, a huge backlog that we've overcome with effort. We were on FATF's gray list when our government took office. And within 1 year, before the papers, we were removed from that gray list. And I have heard FATF's team directly praise how fast Panama took the steps that needed to be taken to be removed from that list. Regarding transparency on fiscal matters, and listen, once again, the Panama Papers showed a system, a global system that we need to look at. You had a Panamanian law firm registering offshores in a second country. 80% of the offshores registered by that law firm were not registered in Panama. And then you have those offshores opening bank accounts in a third country. None of those banks are in Panama. None. And then you have, through that system, people hiding their wealth. I think that's terrible. It's not a question of Panama. It's a question of what the system still allowing. Every country needs to do their part. And we're doing ours. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Next question, please, right here in the middle.
Hi, my name is William Holness. I'm a Columbia University Master in Sustainability Management second-year student, but I'm also a Fulbrighter originally from Panama City, Panama. And I have to say I'm very inspired by your words. And regarding what you were saying about sustainable growth, I know, and we're all aware that Panama is growing and is predicted to keep growing economically. But as a sustainability management student, international environmental policy oriented, my question is, you have mentioned about erosion and some other topics that are coming and becoming very more important if we're facing climate change, as well as the goals that we have committed to for the Conference of the Parties signed in Paris last year. What are the stakes, or what can be shared at this point of what are the objectives or what are the plans for Panama to keep growing and to keep, but doing it sustainably, taking into account our natural resources and our commitments toward the Conference of the Parties?
Thank you. As I participated last week at our Oceans Conference in Washington, I heard Secretary Kerry say that this year, every month has been the hottest month ever, and that this decade was the hottest decade, and the decade before that, the hottest decade. So in terms of environment, that's a big elephant in the room. I mean, it's just not sustainable, the way we're doing things. And in terms of development in general, if we are not able to ensure that growth reaches everybody, what are we doing? Panama has a great challenge in that regard. What are we doing as a government? The most important objective of our government is to work geared towards well-being and investment on the people. We have a 17,500 million investment government plan where most of it is going to water and sanitation. Now it's sad to say, but it's true that a country that has been growing like we still have challenges in terms of water and sanitation, something so basic to people. We were elected with an offer to concentrate on people, to work on the basic needs, and we believe that is a necessity in order to move forward in terms of sustainability. And we have an inclusive view of development, understanding that sustainability lies in bringing people in, taking care of the environment, and being responsible. I don't know if I want to take that question.
Okay. Are you sure?
I'm sure. I don't know. I am sure.
Professor, please. Thank you.
So I'm Joe Stiglitz that you referred to earlier. And let me, I think, try to set the record straight. Our first meeting of the committee was held here at Columbia after the launch in Panama. And at that meeting, there actually was a complete agreement among the members of the committee on two issues. The first was that there had to be transparency of the report. You could not have a report on transparency that was not transparent. It would have no credibility. We also agreed, and obviously somebody didn't communicate this well with you, we also agreed that the government would have time to respond. We said we didn't specify how much time. We said that was a question that the government had to decide, and we would listen to whatever proposal they had. But we recognize, many of us, like Mark, have been on other commissions, and when you make a recommendation, to the UN or to a government, it has to have time to think about it and to say how to respond. So we were very clear that there would be time for that response. But we were also very clear that we could not go forward as a committee without the assurance of the government that the report would eventually be made public without any redaction, without taking out any recommendation. So I don't know where you heard about, but there were several people here who were at that meeting and will confirm what I just said. The second thing is there was actually complete agreement on the committee about what we were going to write about. As you yourself pointed out, the issues of secrecy, secret havens, has to be dealt on a global level. And one has to assess what Panama does in terms of what are the global norms. And so part of our discussion is the evolution of global norms, where they are going, where they should be going, and how Panama needs to fit into that, and that there was an evolving global scene on this. So the committee was in consensus on the issue that we could not discuss Panama without talking about what was going on in the world. And there was no disagreement about the content of our report. Now, after our meeting, we waited for confirmation from the government that there would be this transparency. And, a discussion about, did they want 1 week, 1 month, whatever the terms were. And we never got that assurance. And we tried very hard to communicate with your office, with other people in the government, because we were very concerned that our resignation would have adverse effects on Panama. And we had joined the committee because we wanted to help Panama. And unfortunately, every effort to communicate, including with some members of the committee, turned out to fail. Some members of the committee who were the most, who had some differences of views, said they could take my call in a week or so. So it was clear that we were running into a roadblock. But as I say, in terms of our regional meeting here in New York, there was no disagreement. And there was no, the issue was simply the assurance of the government that there would be transparency and a statement about how much time they wanted. So I don't know where you were hearing your reports from, but they obviously were not an accurate transmission of what happened at our first meeting. Now, in terms of the question going forward, which really is the issue, is, that's the past, and I can say at the minimum there's some misunderstandings. The real issue is going forward. I think there are going to be two issues going forward, broad issues. There have been significant advances in legislation, as you talked about. Their issues are questions of enforcement and implementation. For instance, my understanding is you have a Freedom of Information Act under which this would have been available if anybody had requested it, in any case. And in some context, my understanding is you've talked very proudly about not you personally, but the government's talked proudly about the Freedom of Information Act. But it's interesting, nobody responded when we said the discussions about confidentiality. Nobody responded, oh, by the way, you don't have to worry because we have a Freedom of Information Act. It was obviously not in the minds of anybody on the committee of the existence of this Freedom of Information Act. So there are going to be a number of questions about implementation going forward of all of the legislation. And the second big issue, there are the most difficult, or at least one of the difficult. There are several that we'll be coming forward with a report about what we think all the countries. It's not Panama, but all the countries need to do. One of the big issues is who are the beneficial owners of the corporations, and because the secrecy over that is what gave is why people go to the secret havens, and it makes it very difficult to find out the corruption, and that's why the Panama Papers was so interesting. And the question is there going to be a registry that is at least searchable by enforcement agencies and hopefully by the press on beneficial ownership? And that will be one of the key issues. And it'd be interesting to know what the government's response to beneficial ownership and having a registry that's at least searchable by enforcement agencies.
Vice President, you have a lot there. So
I have what?
There's a lot there. So please, if you could address the
yes,
question.
I had to request a pen to write
take
down
notes.
so I wouldn't forget to answer. I hope I don't.
I think that would, by the way, given the time, that would be the last question that we're going to take, because I know you have other commitments. So please.
Professor Stiglitz, thank you for your frank message, and that just brings me to highlight to all of you the importance of communication. The question on transparency was posed to us, and the answer was clear. Yes, the government has no problem with the report being made public after the government has seen it. We even talked about times, and I said, I don't know, 2, 3 weeks, a month. Let's discuss how long. I don't know what happened, really. But I am glad you're framing it the way you're framing it. That is the past. And we need to concentrate on moving forward. On moving forward, regarding beneficial ownership, actually during the previous government, a law was passed in order to request offshores to register beneficial owners. Also during the past administration, supposedly it was approved and it was to be in effect, say, next year, and it was moved forward to 2018 or something like that during the previous administration. One of the first steps that we took as a government was to bring that back, and that law is into effect January, if I'm not mistaken. So as of January, all offshores registered in Panama should have available the list of beneficial owners. And I agree with you that is critical and very important. Regarding the possibilities of applying and executing and putting in place all of this legislation which refers to institutions, it's a major challenge. It is a major challenge. I've had discussions with the director of taxes in Panama, and he says, listen, I have needs of resources and people in order to collect my own taxes. Now I have to set up a unit that is able to exchange information, and it's not easy. It's very technical. However, we understand that we have weaknesses there. We understand that we have a long way to go, and we are clear that the legislation means nothing if we're not able to implement it. So I can only tell you that we're working very hard at that, and that I hope that we move forward fast. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Vice President. We are at the conclusion of this exchange. Do you have any final remarks for the audience here? And we also wanted to thank you on behalf of Columbia and colleagues and students and the like for your presentation, your frankness, and your willingness to have an open discussion on such important topics that affect not only Panama but all of Latin America and the Caribbean. So, if you want to give some closing thoughts.
Just to thank you all. Thank you for chairing this last part of the conference. Thank you, President Bollinger, for the opportunity. Thank you all students for giving me the chance to share with you a little bit more about my country. Thank you, Professor Stiglitz, Mark, for being present here and having the exchange that we've had. And I'll just conclude by reiterating the great challenges that lay ahead of us, the obstacles that small countries like mine have in terms of moving forward, which is why at the end it's all a matter of people. It's all a matter of willingness. It's all a matter of working with the will to move forward. And I strongly believe we are moving forward. Maybe we could move forward faster globally. I think we could. But as mentioned, there is a lot of hope because we know where our problems are, and that's always a first step. We have every day more and more people interested in learning about the problems and trying to give their contribution to solving them. And your presence here is a reflection of that. Thank you very much. Sí, yo sé.